Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Page Chewing with my wonderful partner, Taylor from ADP to Pages. She just stepped out. She'll be right back. She just had to run off and attend to something quickly. However, while we're waiting for Taylor, I will start by allowing my wonderful guest, our wonderful guest, Taylor and I, to, say hello. Of course, he needs no introduction. He is BookTube's beloved professor, scholar, academic, brilliant author, and one of the most wonderful human beings out there. It's always a good day when we're getting to speak to Philip Chase. So, hello, Philip. How are you doing? And welcome.
Well, thank you for the very kind welcome, PL. I'm doing very well. It's a pleasure to be here to chat with you and with Taylor when she arrives, of course. And yeah, I love this sort of thing. It's so much fun to get to talk to my fellow authors like yourself and people like Taylor who love storytelling and talking about it. And just this is what I live for. So thank you so much for inviting me. The pleasure and the honor are mine.
Well, thanks so much for coming, Philip. And you've been a busy man, shall we say, over the last little while. There's so many things we like to discuss with you. Among them, you might have something coming out soon in the future. We're hopefully going to talk about that. Also, of course, with all the success of the Adan trilogy, including the audiobook for The Way of Adan, and soon coming up an audiobook, I would assume, in the next book of the series, The Prophet of Adan.
Yeah.
And an incredible song that was created involving your daughter, who is quite an accomplished musician herself. So hopefully we'll get to talk about that as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just the start, I think, of what we can delve into, because as I said, you've been a very busy man. But quickly, I have a question for you, and it's not book related in terms of your series, but more of a general question. So, as you know, and as we've talked about previously, I believe we chatted about it briefly when we were on 6 Elemental Interviews on my channel.
Mm-hmm.
I just recently finished Malazan.
Whoa.
So, and I definitely owe a debt of gratitude to especially people such as yourself in AP for all your guidance and encouraging me to, continue in this incredible series. Of course, having the honor of being on several lives with the author Stephen Erickson, having AP guide me and a couple of others in terms of our Malazan journey in some of the first few books. So I finished Malazan, and I was, I knew right away that it was going to be in my top books, traditionally published fantasy series of all time. As soon as you get to that juncture, you just know. I think you may be feeling that way potentially with something like Wars of Light Shadow, that in your ongoing reading, you know that it's going to rank highly. It's a matter of where. Now, recently, not too long ago, I put out my top indie science fiction fantasy series of all time. And, no surprise, this series finished #1. And, again, I knew when I was reading it, it was something really special. I didn't know that it was going to be necessarily #1, but by the time, certainly I finished The Return to Adan, that was clear that your series was absolutely phenomenal and that it would take the top spot in my ranking. The thing, my question is, we, especially as people in the BookTube community, as bloggers, we put these we put these lists together, and we have our own subjective lists of who's #1 and who's #2, and you're always wondering, I think, after you've decided on #1, what books could potentially knock that book out. And we talked a bit about that on 6 Elemental Interviews. However, one thing we didn't talk about was indie series. And I know series of series, authors and authors, I tend to split my list into traditionally published and indie self-published, not because one venue of publishing or another is better or that the books are better, simply to highlight more books. If you had an indie-only list, of top self-published fantasy series.
Oh gosh.
I just want to know who would be right now that you've read so far? Who do you think would be your number one?
Oh, PL, that's a naughty question to start with.
Completed series. So okay, sorry, I apologize. I wasn't playing fair. I didn't give you parameters. So series. Okay, so let's put a little box around it. So series that are finished, indie self-published series that are finished.
Yeah.
And you must have read the whole series. So I think that's a pretty simple.
That makes it even harder. I mean, I'm going to totally waffle on this because I have been privileged to read more and more indie fantasy over the last several years, and not least as a judge for SPFBO. So that has been opening me up more and more to more stories that I've been really loving. It's just a great contest, and does a great job of shining a light on most deserving works. I've a few that I have encountered in the course of that have really spoken to me for sure. One is Hills of Heather and Bone by K.E. Andrews. Loved that book so much. And then I was very lucky, I guess, to have in my batch for SPFBO 9, Murder at Spindle Manor, which I knew right away when I read that book that it was going to be my finalist. And then it went on to win SPFBO 9, which was, not anything. I just happened to be lucky to have it in my batch. I think it would have won the contest, whoever, had it in their batch. But I get to brag a little bit. Yeah, I put that one up there as a finalist, I guess. So, but yeah, that was another one that obviously, I feel very privileged to have read. And there are some others. I had a fun time reading the one that I've nominated from my group this year for SPFBO 10 or Spiff Box. That's The Tenacious Tale of Tana the Tender Sword. I didn't know I'd be nominating a middle grade fantasy as a finalist for SPFBO. So that was you never know what's going to happen, but it's a fun, just lighthearted, but also in moments very serious tale, that deals with some important themes, not least of which is friendship. So yeah, there's that. And, I've read quite a few on my own that I've really loved as well. One that leaps to mind is Nicholas Lietzau's Dreams of the Dying. Really fantastic book that grapples with depression in a way that you will seldom see done. It's a theme that comes up in little spurts here and there, but it's just woven throughout the tale of Dreams of the Dying in a way that I think is done very compellingly. And another one, he's here in the chat, a real favorite of mine that I will never stop shouting about is Von Roycroft's The Sundered Nation trilogy. And I'm so excited to be there. He is, reminding us of the Broken Binding edition of The Way of Adan, which is another really cool thing that has happened recently. I have mine behind me there, my copy. So Von's series, I just adore his Sundered Nation trilogy. Which is the Goths meet Romans in a fantasy setting. So it's historical fantasy. I would categorize it as historical fantasy, which very much appeals to me. I love my history. I love my ancient Germanic tribes and all of that stuff. It's a really great fit for me. Plus, he has just such a great protagonist in the series, complex, flawed, and compelling. And I just love the journey that he's taking me on so far. And the third book is it out now, Vaughn, or is it out? Gosh, I think it's like any day now. The third book is officially out. So yeah, I'm excited to read book 3, Destiny's Doom. I absolutely loved the first 2 books. And then there's this guy named P.L. Stewart. Speaking of flawed, complex protagonists, what you've done in A Drowned Kingdom is nothing less than marvelous. Tuesday, so Vaughn's, okay, I knew we were on the verge of the release of Destiny's Doom. So fantastic. I am so excited to follow up on my, I've only read the first book in your series, PL, and for that, I feel like an idiot because I really need to get on this series. No less a luminary than Jenny Wirtz has been urging me to say, look, this is a series that gets better and better and better with every single book. And I love the first book. So if it gets better and better and better, you know, I'm thinking this is going to be an incredibly impactful literary journey when I finally get going or get back into it. So I'm looking forward to that very much. I really am. And you're another author, PL, who I think you conjure another world so effectively in your storytelling that that is something that is rare to see these days. And I feel that that is one of the reasons why I find your story so immersive. But again, that compelling character, that protagonist who is so deeply flawed. In moments I can't stand you're a protagonist. And then there are moments when I'm rooting for the guy somehow, and I realize, wait, why am I rooting for this jerk? You know, so it's really, you know, my hat's off to you for that. I think that's really great storytelling when you can pull something like that off. So, but yeah, you know, there are just so many great indie series, and I'm looking forward to what's happening now with Spiffbo. With the contest is we're going to have a tournament of champions. So this is the 10th iteration of SPFBO. And what Mark Lawrence has asked us to do now is to read the 10 past champions. And they're going to be basically, we're going to rank them and we're going to have a champion of champions. And that is something I'm really looking forward to because some of them, like Sword of Kaigen, I have it on my shelf. I've been wanting to read it forever. Now I have an excuse. I'm going to be reading it. And that's going to be taking place over the next from the end of the contest. So the contest ends in May. So the champion of champion thing is going to start in June, and it's going to go till the end of the year. And then SPFBO 11 is actually going to start with the new year. So from now on, Spiffbo will run concurrently with the actual calendar year because of this Champion of Champions tournament, if you will. So I have a feeling I'm going to, you know, Rob J. Hayes' book won in the past. I've been wanting to read his stuff as well. It's actually less reading because with a regular contest, I start out with 30 books. So this will be only 10. So it actually makes it more feasible for me to read more of the self-published books that I really want to get to. You know, we've got John in the chat there, John Douglas as well. You know, he's another one who's, you know, a book I want to jump on and check out. And, you know, there's just so many I have on my shelf as well. Yeah, so yeah, I'm excited for, you know, indie fantasy. I think it's a really exciting time, and there's just so many possibilities, and we can produce the very best stories right up there with traditional publishing if we are willing to do that hard work and work with the professional editors who are available to us nowadays, work with the artists, support your fellow creatives, everybody, is to the extent that you can. I know that it's not cheap, but it is really important for us to do that for each other. You know, I feel very strongly about that. So yeah, I'm just so excited. Lots of great stuff ahead.
Okay, well, you know me, Philip. I'm not gonna let you sneak away from the question, but I want to quickly before we get back to that, I just want to say hi to some of the wonderful people who dropped by in the chat. Some of them have already put up some comments. Aaron Wilson, hey Aaron, thank you so much, Aaron, for coming out to support Philip, especially. And we saw the wonderful Vaughn Roycroft. I'm currently in the middle of reading Bold Ascension. It is magnificent. And Vaughn, this series is going to, again, another bold prediction for me. I think Vaughn's series, Thunder Nation, is going to finish in my top 10 indie science fiction fantasy series of all time. I think there will be, unfortunately, some series displaced because of Vaughn's series, because it's just that good. It is phenomenal. Like you, Philip, I love the era of history that has inspired Vaughn's world, and you know, it's just it is phenomenal. So kudos to Vaughn. I can't wait to finish this book and get to the third one. Yeah, we have some wonderful authors in the audience. The great JCM Byrne. I recently read
There's another
Jace,
author I want to read. Yeah, I want to read Joe's book sometime too. Yeah.
JCM's first book was Full Sending. Absolutely spectacular. And not a book, honestly, I typically would have read. I had an absolute blast. Superhero space opera,
Yeah.
great characters, fantastic action. I was all over it. Definitely be continuing his series. That's definitely started something special. So longer series though, so it may take a while for me to be able to assess till I get to all the books about where that could fall. But that looks like another winner
I grew
as
up
well.
on comics. I grew up on comic books, so I'm actually kind of itching to get to Joe's books. Yeah.
Oh, I think you're going to love it. And of course, we have one of the iconic science fiction and fantasy authors anywhere, the wonderful Jenny Wirtz. Jenny, thanks so much for joining. Give us a shout out. You know, Jenny, of course, with the Wars of Light and Shadow, her magnum opus, is my number one favorite science fiction fantasy series of all time. And it's going to be hard to knock that off for me. Now, there's Taylor. Hey. No problem. I was just catching with the comments. I'll quickly do that while we finish off here. And then we have Nerd Level Rising. Hey, how's it going? Thanks so much.
Hello, Jake.
For coming out. And says I've been cheating because I haven't read a ton of miniseries yet, but he then certainly tops that chart. There's someone else, Philip, who feels that the Dan trilogy is number one for them. And then we have Mr. Rose coming by to say hi. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Britton is here. Samoki dude. Hey, how's it going, Britton? Thanks so much for coming by. We have lots of chat. See, Philip brings it all everyone to come out and check him out. James, the Medium Answer. Hey, James, thanks so much for coming by. We have the Unicorns Read. Wow, awesome.
Yeah.
Great to see you as well.
Absolutely.
And we also have the awesome Brian Bell. So kind. One of my favorite booktubers there in the chat.
The Grand Kuba of the Quiluminati. I feel.
Oh yes, the Quiluminati, the four big reviewers there, and then Vishwood. Thanks for coming by again. So just start getting in fantasy. Partially side effect of starting to write my own book, but it's a great space. So so quickly, what I will do is just one more. It's Chad Zaman says hello, friends. So quickly before we get to Taylor's questions, etc. I just wanted to finish off what I was asking Mr. Chase Taylor quickly. So Philip, so if I had to hold your feet to the fire,
oh gosh,
is there a completed indie science fiction fantasy series that you have read? So completed that you have read that you would put as your number one.
As my number, I hate ranking things, PL. I hate putting points on things and ranking things. And
he knows that, Philip. That's why.
Yeah.
That's why I'm the worst booktuber ever. But yeah, no, it's very hard for me to do. I hate even doing that. I don't know. I mean, I won't answer the question because I'm going to hedge and evade, but I have been thinking about this actually, and if I ever had the hubris to do another top 10 whatever video,
which we love, by the way, we love those.
I know, and I hate making them, but because they're just so agonizing. But do I want to do separate ones for a serious question? Do I want to do separate ones for? And I know this has been your approach, and there are a lot of good reasons for it. Do I want to separate indie and traditional published? And the pros of that would be, yeah, because I get to highlight more indie fantasy that way, which is obviously that's part of the goal when you make a top 10 thing. You want to highlight, shout about some of the great stories that you love, and you get to do more of it. So in a way, it's a nice little cheat thing you could do, right? On the other hand, I want to send the message more and more to people that indie is just as good. It can be just as good as traditionally published. And if you segregate them, you're almost sending a message that no matter what, indie is just sort of the lesser, the ugly sibling or whatever of traditionally published. You know what I mean? So do I want to separate them or not? And I think that's a legitimate conversation that we could have. I'd be curious to see how Taylor handles that as well. Is it better to shine more light on the indie by separating it, or is it better to just put them all together? Or is it unfair to put them all together? Because obviously the traditional published, they have more resources, you know.
Right.
Or is it better just to say, hey, indie's just as good, it can be just as good, and you should just mix them all together, get in the deep part of the swimming pool, everybody, push them all in the deep end, rather than having the kiddie pool for the indie fantasy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Before I answer, I do want to just a couple disclaimers. One, sorry I'm late to those in the chat. The daughter is safely off to school, and the husband also has a sushi test today at sushi school, so he forgot his knife, so I had to get that to him. So that's a good start to it. Anyway, and the other disclaimer is I do have a slight cold, courtesy of my daughter as well. So if I have to step to the side to use a tissue, for those in the chat as well, I apologize. Also for my voice. Disclaimers out the way. Answering your question itself. I'm also not a ranker. I do it once or twice a year. I do it for like the mid-year freak out tag that everyone does. I rank my top 10 so far for the year. And then I do a top 10 for the whole year. But I just don't enjoy making top 10 videos, you know, top 10 best characters, top 10 this, top 10 that. I don't mind watching them, but making them doesn't bring me joy.
Much more fun to watch. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't have to make those choices. So something that you'll find in those videos I do is I always break my own rules and add a couple at the beginning or a couple at the end. Yeah. So I have a hard time with it too, in general, Philip, is what I'm trying to say, doing that ranking. But when I do rank, I do put indie and self-pub together because I feel like they should be judged by the same standard, because they can be the same standard in my reading world, like excluding the publishing process. So I do put them together in the top 10, and I don't often mention that they're self-published, if that's the case. I just say these are my top 10, and I like to present them next to each other as similar. However, I do make dedicated self-published videos if it's not a top 10. So I'll say, you know, some self-published books you should read. Or one that I've been thinking about doing for a long time is if you like this trad book, try this indie book. Like that kind of thing, I think is beneficial. But for the top 10, I put them together. Thanks.
You mix them up. Okay.
Yeah, for passing that to me. I think maybe you struck the heart of things without me realizing it when you said the kiddie pool, you know, imagery. I don't want, for me, it would feel like I was doing that. Not that the people who separate it like PL are doing that, but for me, it would feel like that. So that's why I don't, I guess.
Yeah. Let's have the other side of that, because PL, obviously you've separated them, and I think there are very important and valid reasons for that too. Do you want to? I hate to now I'm putting you on the spot.
You know you're interviewing an interviewer when you've switched it so deftly.
I'm actually just trying to get out of the question.
We're not going to let him get away too much, because this is all about Philip, not about me. But so these are the main reasons I switched them. And it's all my fault. And I said that in my video, in that I haven't read enough completed indie fantasy series. That's my fault. I started later. I find that some of what I believe would be my favorite indie fantasy series. So perhaps it's another cheat. Some of the series that I believe will wind up being my top indie fantasy series are not completed yet. So I know that my ranking would be in such flux if these series suddenly completed. So I would have to, unfortunately, there's series that are completed are fantastic, but might not necessarily have made the top 10, say for the fact they are completed and I've read them. So again, that's on me. So those are the main reasons. You know, I think most of us are behind in terms of catching up on the indie series that we really want to read. So by virtue of that, if I put on a ranking of my top 10 fantasy series, period, I would probably exclude most of the indie series wouldn't be there, simply by virtue of, you know, I've read so many more completed trad series that would rank higher nominally. So that's why I did it. And I totally agree, like Philip and Taylor, like those are really valid points why. And I've struggled with this. about whether I should continue doing it that way. But I think what the decision I've come to is that there will come a point, and I don't know when that is. I can't tell you. I can't give you a definitive timeline, but I think organically, my reading of indie series will have caught up. I'll feel I have a proper pool, shall we say, from which to draw from both indie and traditional publishers that is somewhat equal, if I can quantify it that way, if I can qualify it that way, and then I will combine and simply put out, as you said, top 10 science fiction fantasy books, whether it's indie or trad. No one, it doesn't matter, and that will be other way, because I want to know that I can legitimately and honestly, with some integrity, have a bunch of indie series on there, because now I've read enough, they're completed, so I can, because for example, one thing that I refuse to do is, it's just my personal rule. Everybody has their own rules for these rankings. For example, I left A Song of Ice and Fire off my top traditionally published science fiction fantasies all the time because it's not finished. And I put in the honorable mentions, but I said it can't make the list because that is, George R. R. Martin is one of my favorite authors. That series would be certainly top 3 or 4. But I in my mind, I couldn't do it because it's not finished. Just like if someone asked me subjectively, what about your series, PL, in terms of like, it's a 7-book series, you got 4 books out, 5's coming. No, it's not a completed series yet. One day it will be. You can't, I don't feel you can properly assess the depth and breadth of a series until it is finished, and be able to look back and reflect and say, well, these are the reasons why. Like Malazan, like the Dan trilogy, like you name your series, to be able to say, this is why this series is so great as a whole.
Yeah, I think it's an important question for us to wrestle with in a way, because the truth is, I think there still is a prejudice out there against indie, and I get it, because it was the case often that in the past that the whole idea of it being a sort of a vanity project or what have you. That's a very outmoded way of looking at it, though. Right now, very outmoded. And also, I think a lot of people just assume, well, you couldn't get it traditionally published, so it can't be very good, right? And that's just the prejudice that's out there, without understanding that the traditional publishing industry is broken. Not only is it broken in the sense that they're not picking up a lot of titles that really should be picked up and would do really well, but it's broken in the sense that a lot of the deserving stories that they do pick up disappear. They wither on the vine because of the economics of it, And it's not that the people in traditional publishing are bad people; they're good people. They're trying to get out great stories too, but the economics of it are just they're in a situation where there's more and more pressure. Profits are shrinking because of a combination of circumstances. So they have to pick a couple winners, and that's it. Those are the ones that you're going to hear about. The others, there are so many great stories out there that have been traditionally published that you and I have never heard of and never will hear of, because nobody ever says a word about them. They just disappear. And I've heard about that many times. It's a nightmare scenario, really. Here you are, you've won the lottery, once when you got an agent, another time when you got your publisher, an agent convinced the publisher, but you didn't win that third lottery, which is when the publisher really backs your book, right? And it just seems like such a sad thing. So in that sense, maybe indie is a smarter way to go for a lot of us, unless you think you're going to be one of those 2 or 3 titles that they really get behind. Maybe indie is a better way to go, because at least you're going to succeed or not on your own effort and merits to some degree, at least. I mean, there's some luck still even then, but if I have to toil away and put on my marketing hat just as much as a traditionally published author, well, then why don't I just do it myself? Anyway, I'm doing all the work anyway, if I'm not Stephen King or whatever. So why not, But I think that what we're still struggling with is this prejudice. this idea that indie equals inferior somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, look, if you were to take 100 traditionally published books and take 100 indie books, you would find a similar range in quality. You would find some books at the very top in both categories in terms of quality. But I do think that probably you would find more at the bottom of the pile, at least in my experience, in the indie category. There's just because a lot of people either don't have the means to get all the help that they should, or don't understand yet that they should get more help with the editing. Like they think, okay, I've written a book and now I'm going to put it out in the world and everything's great. I mean, usually you're going to benefit a lot from having other eyes on your book, and you're going to benefit a whole lot if you can afford to get professional eyes on your book. So I think that the range you will find, yes, I will admit that much. I will admit that maybe you'll find more books that have issues in the indie pile and of those 100 books than you would in the traditional, but not that you won't find terrible traditionally published books with lots of typos and everything else. You'll find that. But my major assertion is that it is possible for an indie author to reach the same heights as a traditionally published author. That's the important thing, I think, here. If you have all the the means to do that and the willingness to work really, really hard. So yes, and I think Jenny has a great point there as well when she says it's less of a prejudice than the barrier of visibility and accessibility. No library, can't get into bookstores because the traditional publishers have a deal with the bookstores, and that pretty much excludes us indie authors, right? So I think that's a factor as well. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard for us to get noticed to the same degree, to get that hype, to get that groundswell, if you will. It's much harder as an indie author.
I think a lot of that, I mean, you hit so many good points there, but I think a lot of that comes from just the amount, the number, right? So if it's free form, anyone can put a book out. There's just more to work with, more to sift through, right? So that's why, just going back to while I was doing things around the house, I was listening to you guys talk before I joined. So you were talking about SPIFFO. That's why those kinds of things, while can be difficult to navigate, what rules you want to follow and how to navigate the space, they are important because it gets eyes on, it puts a spotlight on some things and gives you a place to start. And that's why also I think making those indie focused videos is so important. Because right. if someone wants to start with indie and they look on YouTube and nothing comes up, they're probably just going to read a trad. But if there's a bunch of indie stuff out there by people who really love it, right, or a lot of indie based content is what I'm trying to say, about people who really enjoy it, it gives someone a starting point and it's less daunting, right? Yeah. So like when I joined, I had a starting point, right? PL was already in it and Steve before was already in it, and they both just helped me kind of get my bearings. So I think that's important. And before we move on from indie, there was one more comment I wanted to put up. Before that, I'll put Joanna up. Joanna's here just to say hi.
Hi, Joanna.
And also Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy. Just stopping by. So we have here from Ryan, a follow-on to the trad versus self-pub. When a trad pub author breaks the rules, we typically assume they do it on purpose. When indies break the rules, does the reader allow that, or are they more harsh? I thought this is a fantastic question because I think there is a gap in the benefit of the doubt provided to someone, right? So if they don't follow something that people think is normal or is the way things should be done, it's like, oh, they made a mistake, right? Not they've done this on purpose. So I kind of agree with this take. I think there is a gap, but I would love to hear your thoughts, Philip, as someone who reviews very frequently, right? Do you think that this is an issue?
Oh, I think that Ryan is absolutely right. Yeah, that there is much less benefit of the doubt when it comes to indie, that there is a prejudice that exists, that if you're already coming along expecting something to be inferior, then you're going to see it as inferior when you see it not conforming. And the thing about indie is it's actually one of the virtues of indie that it's where a lot of the creativity is happening. because it
That's
is
fair.
possible to break the rules. It is possible to do something new. It is possible to, not worry about the bottom line as much as the, and again, I don't think this is because traditional publishing people are evil or anything like that. It's just they have more restrictions on what they do because of the economics of it all. But we indie people, we just go crazy, and do crazy things, like release all 3 books in 1 year or something like that, So you can do, you get to make it up a lot, and it's a kind of a wild, wild west sort of scenario, which I find somehow very appealing, and I'm interested to see what comes out of this because there's a lot of boiling under the surface going on, I think, in the indie sphere, in a way that I find to be interesting, and perhaps there's always going to be something of a relationship too between trad publishing and indie. But one thing I would love to see go away is this idea that once an indie author is recognized enough, they get the stamp of approval when a traditional publisher grabs them. And now they're a real author. Like, you'll even find some authors who will write traditionally published author on their Twitter profile or whatever. And that kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit, because why do you need to say that? Why is that? Because they understand that the prejudice against indie authors is out there, I think. So, but yeah, I think that I agree very much with Ryan on that point. I don't know. What do you think, PL?
I totally concur. I mean, you're talking to someone who has broken a lot of rules in their series that no traditional publisher will ever touch what I write for a variety of reasons, including how flawed my character is, and the fact that the viewpoint is so candid and harsh in terms of his bigotry and things like that. I mean, I honestly don't think a traditional publisher would ever touch my series. I remember reading an article, a very, very well-known and popular industry executive in traditional publishing, going on ad nauseum about you can't sell books with main characters that people don't like. That's just it's a non-starter, right? And he said if you do, you have to be the rare author that is. He mentioned specifically Mark Lawrence, and he was talking about Broken Empire trilogies. George and Carth is not a likable person at all. However, the book is brilliant, and Mark Lawrence is a phenomenal author. But yeah, he was just saying, unless you're in that rare stratosphere of certain authors, then you can do it. Even though, again, when Mark Lawrence wrote, I believe that was his first book, so it's not as if he had already been established with all his bestsellers prior. So I found it to be. I didn't agree, obviously, with.
That's
with
a wild take to have. The classics and literary fiction would like to have a word with that man or woman, whoever the publisher was.
This is a very. I'm not going to mention the name, but this was a very, very prominent industry executive. So but of course, someone like me took that and said, I'm an Indian. I don't have to worry about all that. So.
Yeah, that's the problem when I think the traditional publishing can become a victim of its own formulas, and when it gets too formulaic or too trend driven, you're gonna miss some great stories. You're gonna miss some great stories if you're saying to yourself, well, no, we don't do epic fantasy anymore, or no, we can't have flawed protagonists, or we can't have this or that, and because it doesn't fit what everybody seems to want right now. Then gosh, it seems like you're going to miss a lot that way,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. Well, that's why I'm hoping like something like what Wraithmark is doing, they're really bridging the gap between those two worlds. I think they're doing a fantastic job. So I think if you have someone, it doesn't have, well, at this point, it might have to be a middleman who is good at that communication, bridging the gap. I think the two communities could exist well together. But right now, I think they're trying to find the way that they fit together, and they're not quite fitting yet. Like you said, there's a lot of top skimming that gives people a bad taste in their mouths. So I think we're situating ourselves right now, the two communities is one way to put it. But I would like to loop this back around to you, of course, Philip, which I know you love, making you talk about you. But you had mentioned earlier the idea of the rapid release of books being something that you could choose to do. And it is something that you did choose to do with The Way of a Dan, right? And I was curious, you know, PL was talking earlier about the idea of not including unfinished series in his top 10s. And a lot of people will say, I won't read a series until it's finished. I'm not in that camp, but I do know a lot of people who are in that camp. So I'm curious if those kinds of ideas had an effect on that choice that you made, or what was like the background for you for deciding to say, all right, you know what, I can do this, I'm going to do this, right? What were the deciding factors?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to be stupid enough to spend 18 years writing a trilogy. So that was a factor. It was just like, yeah, I'm done with this. I want these books out now, you know? So that was definitely just a sort of a personal desire to have the entire story out in the world, because I had been working on it for so long, nearly 2 decades. Started in 2004 and published it in 2023. So, you know, that was a liberating thing. And I felt that they were ready. I felt the story was ready, you know, after tinkering and playing and tweaking and getting great feedback from people like the agent that I did work with when I thought in the beginning I was going to go the traditional route, or from AP Canavan, whose channel is called A Critical Dragon, who I hired as my developmental editor, and you know, did a fantastic job, I think, to help me see things that I could do even better and improve that story. So I felt like I had made this story as good as I possibly could, and I felt ready. And yes, I will also admit that what you mentioned, the idea that people are more likely to read a series or begin to invest in a series if they know it's finished or will be finished. So I was hoping that would be a selling factor for sure in publishing all 3 books in 1 year. So I don't know if it necessarily was a brilliant strategy or not, but I could do it. So I figured, why not? You know, I had all 3 books ready. And it was just a matter of getting the covers done and working with some lovely people on the art and the cover design and the map, and, you know, just getting all those other things in place. And but yeah, that's how I ended up doing it. And the main thing, though, was that sense of liberation and empowerment when I finally made the decision to self-publish. Yeah.
Well, it's not even that you released all 3 in a year. You had a whole package with this thing. You've got music that's been composed.
Yeah.
You had like I think, didn't you have a commercial? Not a commercial, but wasn't there like a Way of a Dan release video? Did that happen?
Well, I've made various videos.
Okay. So I was like, pretty sure.
You might be thinking of, so I did recently commission Nikhil Koparkar, who's a wonderful individual and is, you know, very modest and humble, but has some pretty serious credentials. In fact, some of his music is coming out now on The Wheel of Time season 3, you know, and he's written for a lot of television shows and movies and such. And I couldn't believe, so here he is. He has a YouTube channel called Shelf Esteem. And I'm like, wait, this guy should be like famous, you know, he should be huge. And I was like, wow. And I listened, because I love music. I think music is the closest we can get to the divine, really. And so I always fantasized about having music to go with my trilogy, something that would evoke the essence of my story. I've always wanted that. I don't know why. that's something I've dreamed about.
It couldn't possibly be Tolkien or any of your influences or Beowulf that made you want that.
Who knows? Possibly. Yeah, who knows? But I thought, all right, here's my opportunity. Here's a person who not only is immensely talented and has the credentials and the ability, but also has the right background, because I think people know very well that I'm a medievalist. I'm in Old English, Old Norse, all that. But also maybe people don't know that I lived in South Asia, and that Hinduism and Buddhism are very important influences in the underlying philosophy and in the magic in the world that I created. So that's a very important thing too, in terms of the invented cultures as well, you know. So and Nikhil has a background that's just perfect. He grew up here in the United States, but his parents are from India, and he knows the influences, you know, so he was just perfect. He knows the influences philosophically, but also musically, and that piece that he created has all these elements, you know. And just for me, I hear it, and I just see certain scenes from the book, and having done the Broken Binding special edition, I was able to make that little video with his music and the art from the special edition, you know, kind of scrolling along to the music. And it was just like, I haven't, you know, Hollywood hasn't come knocking yet or anything like that. But so for me, it was the closest I'll get, you know.
Yeah.
So.
There we go. There we go. Well, speaking, I mean, now I feel foolish because, okay, Tolkien spent 18 years, I spent 18 years, but Johnny Wirtz spent 50 years, 50, on the Wars of Light and Shadow. That's a serious commitment right there. That's a life's work right there. And that is a series that I'm so happy to be in the midst of. It's just brilliant stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I did listen to the piece.
Okay.
Last night. Yeah. And I did notice the different influences coming together. I am in no way a musical master, but I do listen to a lot of different genres. So that allowed me to be like, oh, that seems like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Right. Yeah. Something that really stuck out to me were like the bells, like chime that you hear.
Yes. Yes.
That really stuck out. And that sounded South Asian to me.
They are.
So
they are South Asian. Yes.
Yeah. So it does. It comes through. It comes through if you know the references. So that just must be such an amazing moment for you to see it depicted both visually by such talented artists and then musically by, well, I guess another talented artist.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Just Renee Agner's art and Peng Lu's art and Jack Shepard's map and obviously Nikhil's composition, plus my daughter Rohana, who's also, you know, she's a hybrid too. She's South Asian and an American. So to have her play the cello for the piece, the main melody was extra special for me. And there are, you know, flavors of South Asian influence in the way she plays the piece too. So, so yeah, it's just, you know, dream come true really. And it's just something that I felt would hopefully be a thing for people who've read the books and could relive the books that way, but also maybe a way to introduce the trilogy to people who have not read the books and give them a sense of the vibe, you know. So yeah, and just for me personally, just to relive the story in a way and in 3 minutes and 42 seconds. So
I just want to speak in there quickly, but like Taylor continued that. But you're, you know, and I know you must be a proud papa. Isn't your daughter, isn't she going to Juilliard? Like, isn't she, I mean, she sounds like she's quite an accomplished musician.
So the story there is Rohana went to the Juilliard pre-college program when she was in high school. And that meant I had to drive her in every Saturday to Manhattan to Juilliard. And she worked with a professor from Juilliard and as her private teacher and was in an orchestra there, did a lot of chamber music. It was a huge investment. Like her whole Saturday or throughout her high school years was spent at Juilliard the whole day. So she didn't, you know, she's not a normal kid, you know, in this going out and having fun on the weekend or whatever. She couldn't, you know, she was just committed to this. So yeah, she did not go to Juilliard for college. She went to Princeton, proud dad, and was in the orchestra there as well. And ended up being the principal cellist her senior year. And they have an outstanding university orchestra there. So it was, yeah, that's her background. But she's done a lot of, you know, in her own, you know, on her own, after having this sort of classical training, done a lot of kind of fusion stuff, is experimenting, creating her own sounds. Yeah, just, she's still pursuing her music today. So yeah.
I can hear the pride in your voice, being such a proud dad.
Yeah.
I
It's
love
in
that.
one of the most prestigious schools in the U.S., Ivy League school. Like
Casual.
just like, oh yeah, it's the Princeton. But wow, amazing.
Smart kid. Yeah, good kid. I'm a very lucky dad.
Only Princeton.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so there were a couple comments here before we move on. Let me pull them up, and we'll just continue with this one. Indie authors get to do dumb things like plan super long series or write genres trad doesn't care about, like lit RPGs. Yeah, and then they seem to care about them, right? Once they get popular enough. Yeah. So I think that shows the power that indie has. But another comment that I wanted to bring up and also connect it to your release and everything that you've done for The Way of Adan so far is Sarah mentioned, also I feel like a lot of people shifted to audiobooks, and those are hard to find for indie books. But you have an audiobook done by a very beloved member of our community, right?
Yeah. I just feel so fortunate to have worked with all these talented people, and Alan is definitely one of them. So Alan from the Library of Alexandria, Alan Walker, is the narrator for my trilogy, and the first book is out as an audiobook. And I'm not even an audiobook listener myself, or I wasn't until I heard Alan's narration of The Way of Adan. And I didn't think I was even going to listen to the whole thing because I've never succeeded in listening to an entire audiobook. And why would I listen to one about a story that I already know really well, right? But I was entranced by his performance. That's just how good he was. And he did the voices distinct voices for every character, even some very minor characters, you know, very distinct voices. And he did such a tremendous job with it. I couldn't be happier with his performance. And he is going to be finishing The Prophet of Adan, book 2. And I think we're looking at, most likely now, it's not for sure yet, but I will be shouting when it is. But most likely we're going to be looking at an April release for The Prophet of Adan. So hopefully, we shall see. But he is making progress on that. And we also think that Return will be out in the summer. So yeah.
That's fantastic, Philip. Congratulations. Yeah. And reference that question. I know that because audiobooks, they can be expensive. They can be pricey. You know, and I think to the comment about the fact that with audiobooks growing popularity, a lot of indie authors, I mean, in some cases it's cost prohibitive, especially if you have a book that's, you know, 200,000 words, you know, 220,000 words. I mean, you know, producing an audiobook, you know, you're talking to the, you know, potentially the tens of thousands, you know, it's not cheap. But at the same time, it is a gateway via which a lot of some readers cannot consume books except for audio because of various concerns. And of course, some simply prefer audio and just find their enjoyment enhanced. There's nothing wrong with that at all. That said, yeah, I mean, a traditionally published author does have that ability,
yeah,
to go audio, and you know, via the publisher that an indie has to foot the bill for, you know, up front, and that could be, as I said, quite cost prohibitive. So,
yeah, absolutely. If you're going to go with an accomplished audiobook narrator, you're looking at a minimum of $200 per finished hour. So you can do the math there. You know, if your book or your audio book ends up being 15, 20 hours long, that's very expensive. And, you know, you never know how these things go. But, you know, for me, it's been the least immediately profitable thing I've done in terms of the publishing, the self-publishing. But ultimately, I'm so happy with the performance, and it's a thrill to me that this story has in some way been able to support other creative people, whether it be the art in the special edition or the music that Nikhil composed or Alan's narration. And that in and of itself is just, you know, it makes it worth it for me. And if I see a bit of a profit, hey, great, that's wonderful too, you know. But the main thing is to put out some beautiful things in the world, and you know, that's the goal, the primary goal.
Well, I think you've done that through many different facets. I think PL would agree with that. But I wanted to add this comment from Daniel because it made me chuckle. I love what Alan did for the guy on the ferry.
That's exactly, yes. Yeah.
As a boring guy with nothing interesting to talk about, Alan did it like the medieval version of an autistic train enthusiast.
Yeah.
Which I love. And that does show like what audiobooks can bring to the experience, right? One of the audiobooks that I have been dying to pick up and just haven't is Andy Serkis's version of Lord of the Rings, because I read Lord of the Rings physically, but I have heard from so many people that he brings infinite value to the story through his narration. So that's been something I've been wanting to listen to for probably 2 years now. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, you know, when you tell yourself, I'm going to do it when it feels right, when I could do all three at the same time, and then you never do it. That's kind of what happened for the last 2 years. But good audiobook narrators like Travis Baldree or whatever, they can really add a new element to the story, I think.
Oh, for sure. Funny you should mention Andy Serkis because I'm actually, after listening to Alan's narration, I decided, let me try again. And I'm listening to Fellowship of the Ring, narrated by Andy Serkis.
Look at that.
Yep. How about that?
Are the rumors true?
Yes, absolutely. He's brilliant. His performance is outstanding. And it's funny because he is reading Tolkien's text, but he also does give distinct voices. Most of the characters, though, you'll notice if you've watched the Peter Jackson films, he does their accents. So, for example, when he does Pippin, he gives Pippin a Scottish accent because Billy Boyd had a Scottish accent in the films. Even though none of the other hobbits had a Scottish accent, he gives Pippin a Scottish one. Or he does a really good Gandalf, Ian McKellen impersonation, basically. He does outstanding. There are moments when I think, did they hire Ian McKellen to do Gandalf? Because he does such an outstanding job. There are certain characters he does a little differently, maybe because he just couldn't find that voice. Like Aragorn doesn't sound particularly like Viggo Mortensen, but I love his Aragorn voice. He does a much deeper voice for Aragorn. But yeah, his performance is marvelous. And I'm so glad that I'm able to listen to it and enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah. Audiobooks take a while to kind of find out where you settle, right? I remember the first one I tried was a fantasy I hadn't read before. And I was like, this is not working. I don't know what's going on.
I couldn't.
But then I started doing thrillers and nonfiction via audio. Thrillers via audio, I'm telling y'all, do it. Thrillers and horror are so good via audio. And that showed me how good it could be, right? So now I can do fantasy. It's just a different approach, right? I got to slow it down, or it's got to be something I've already read. Like when I reread Stormlight Archive in preparation for Wind and Truth, which I still haven't read, but I did prepare for it. I did audio. And so that's a way to re-enter a world in a new way, right? So I think audiobook, you just kind of have to figure out where you sit, how it works for you.
Right now, for me, that means I'm only going to listen to books that I know really, really well. I'm not quite adventurous enough yet to try things that I'm not really intimately familiar with, because I feel my problem when I tried audiobooks earlier was I kept falling asleep or missing things and rewinding. And I found it more difficult to rewind than to with a physical book. I just zoned out. Let me reread that paragraph. You know, that doesn't bother me for some reason, but having to rewind on the my phone or whatever, it just booted me out of the experience, you know. So I considered myself a failure as an audiobook listener. But now I think I'm beginning to learn this skill. I appreciate it as a way of re-experiencing a story that I know well already. That's how I'm engaging with it for now. And maybe I'll graduate to listening to books that I don't know yet at some point. But right now, I know Lord of the Rings back and forth and inside out. So I feel at home and not nervous about listening to this performance. So
yeah, I do think it's a practice skill. It's something that
you
get used to. And if you just stay in the reread zone, that's also fine. You know, sometimes and then you get to know yourself. So sometimes I'll look at a fantasy, and for example, Sons of Darkness is one that I've been working my way through very slowly.
Yeah.
And I thought I could do audio, but then I read what it was about and how complex it was. I was like, absolutely not. Like, so you just know what's not going to work for you and what will, right?
Yeah.
But I know, PL, you're not an audiobook guy, right? You haven't jumped on that bandwagon yet.
No, unfortunately. Although, you know, I do aspire to get there one day. I don't think I'll ever consume. I don't think I'll ever. The vast preponderance of my reading will always be, my preferred medium would be physical. Have that physical book. When you pick up a book and you're just like this and you're just immersed and you're lost, and, you know, as Philip said, if I, even not so much if I zone out, if the beauty of a passage, right? Philip's prose is fantastic. I can look back and, you know, okay, I love that sentence, that passage. I can go back and reread it, or like right away, and it's just that instant gratification, I think, and that really enhances my immersion. I just find audiobooks, the few that I've tried, it's a bit harder. Although I love listening to my own audiobook for John Kingdom, but you know, which is you know, but that's probably one of the few that I've actually listened to because I had to. But yeah, well, perhaps one day I definitely plan to listen to, for example, Philip's series in audiobooks, because I love his writing, and I believe that I could get that level of immersion by listening to it. You know, but so I think it might be select books that I do that with, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Just want to throw this up. Stephen Pacey time. Yeah, listen, he's the audiobook narrator for oh my God, why I just thank you, First Law. There we go. For First Law. And it is like, I can't imagine Glaucida with any other voice. Like, Stephen Pacey has cemented that character and the way that I hear him in my head.
So that's what I have on my docket after I finish The Lord of the Rings, because I've read First Law 2 times already, and I feel like, and plus, like you said, it's the Stephen Pacey praise I've been hearing for years now. So I think that's after Lord of the Rings, that'll be my next audiobook listen.
I think that's a really good choice. Yeah. It was my first time through, and I did the first one physical, and hot take, but it was all right. Like, it didn't blow my mind. But then the second book I did audio, and then I got it, right? So something about that just clicked for me. So just play with it, right? Until you find what you need. But I think you're going to love it.
Yeah, I already love First Law, so yeah.
Easy peasy there. Sarah agrees with me. Thriller podcast audiobooks with a full cast, or sometimes they have sound effects. It's so good in that form. This just made me giggle. A little prophet of a Dan, huh?
Yeah.
From the past. And I did want to throw this question to PL. That's been there for a minute, which is, will the rest of the Drowned Kingdom be coming to audio?
Yeah, it's funny how often I'm not that popular, but I do get asked frequently about that. Yeah, as we talked about earlier, and thank you so much, James, for the interest. The question, audiobooks are expensive, so my goal is, because my series is so long, it is a 7-book series, and audiobooks are pricey, to reduce that. Once I have the entire Drowned Kingdom saga in physical ebook form, then we will go back and revisit, based on if the sales continue fairly well as they are, that then we will go back and start producing audiobooks from the last of the Atlanteans onwards. But that will be some time until that happens. But, you know, unfortunately, because again, you know, my audiobook sales have been fairly decent, but, you know, my ebook sales are what's driving, you know, my series. So I think ebooks and hardcovers, some reason, my hardcovers seem to be doing well, but audiobooks, it's not that they're not doing well, but I would need to be able to justify the cost, frankly, to produce, you know, 6 more audiobooks for the Drowned Kingdom saga. You know, so, but by the time I finish the series, that may, you know, it may be in that position where I can more easily do that. Certainly for books 2 and 3, it's trending that way, that those might come out fairly quickly after I finish this series. But beyond that, I'd have to see how the series sells as a whole. So it's not finished yet. But thank you for the question.
Yeah. So one other thing that I definitely wanted to bring up, because we're coming up on an hour, and I know that we can probably talk for another 3 hours, but just in case, I want to make sure we get to this, which is, you have a new release coming.
Ah, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the title is While Darkness Gathers. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah, and it's a novella in your Adan world. Is that
well, comparatively speaking, it's 91,000 words. So I think that still counts as a novel.
What does that mean to someone who's not an author? What does 91,000 words mean?
So the Way of Adan is 165,000 words.
Okay.
And it's, I don't know, how many pages is it, PL? 400 something. Yeah, it's about 444 pages. So that's, yeah, 444 pages, 165,000 words. So 91,000 words. And this is a floppy trade paperback. 91,000 is, it's probably, I don't know, somewhere between 200 and 300 pages. I'm thinking. So yeah. Definitely well out of novella territory, but you know, by fantasy standards, not very long as a novel.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
And the other books are much longer in the trilogy. But yeah, sorry, what did you say?
I was just saying, could you tell us a little bit about it? Like what
sure.
How does it slot in for people who love your world? Just tell me what to expect.
Yeah. So it is a sequel to the Adan trilogy. And I think you get more out of it if you've read the trilogy as opposed to reading it on its own. But, you know, that said, I won't protest if someone just wants to read While Darkness Gathers. But it is 16 years after the trilogy ends. And so it's a look at some of the characters who are alive at the end of the trilogy do appear. And there are some new characters as well. And the title kind of hints at some of the themes, really, in a way. The idea that, well, there's a wonderful story I'll share with you. It's actually from the Ecclesiastical History of the English People by the Venerable Beda, whose name, a lot of people say it Bede. It's B-E-D-E. But if you're really going to be cool like me, you say Beda. So, now, he tells a story in this very important historical book of a time when the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were being presented with Christianity by missionaries. And slowly, one after another, they were converting to Christianity in the, in the 7th century. So one of these kings, Edwin, I think it was Edwin, was presented with the case by a missionary and had his counselors all next to him. And he said, okay, thank you very much for telling us all about this newfangled thing, you know, this new religion. And if you'll just step out now, I'll talk to my advisors and we'll have a chat about it. And so, yes, so guys, what do you think? And they talked about it and they had various opinions about the advantages or disadvantages or whether they should convert to Christianity. And one of them said something that's a very famous passage from Beda. He said something to this effect. He said, you know, life is like this. We're all sitting around in the mead hall together. And we're sitting around the fire. And the bard is telling one of the old tales of our ancestors, bringing them back to life momentarily as we sit together. And it's dark outside. It's night. And there's a hailstorm. And, you know, but we're here together in this moment of light and warmth, you know. And then suddenly in one end of the hall, because they had windows at both ends of the hall to let out the smoke, you know. And suddenly in one end of the hall flies a sparrow from the darkness into the hall, and it flits straight through the hall and out the other window, back into the darkness. And he said, that's life, essentially. You know, we're here for this brief moment together in the light, but what comes before, what comes after is darkness, you know. And that's you could argue that that perception of life is very much at the heart of the old Germanic conception of heroism, right? That ultimately we're doomed. Ragnarok is going to wipe us all out. You know, the end of days is coming, and we'll all be wiped out. And you could see that as a very pessimistic view, but actually there is nothing more important than courage in the face of certain doom. You know, we're here right now. Let's make something of it. You know, let's meet it with courage, whatever it is. Let's meet that darkness with as much courage as we can muster, you know? So I guess the question is, what do we do in this moment of light while darkness gathers all around us? You know, how do we respond to the fact that we are surrounded by the unknown? You know, what's our response to that going to be? So that's kind of where that title comes from in a way. And it relates a lot to things that happen in the trilogy as well.
Well, I mean, if I wasn't sold before, but I think that hearing that theme, that's what it's working with, I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people right now. just with everything. Well, just with everything. I feel like a lot of people are really going to resonate with that. What do we do? What can we do? What is within our power? And I think we won't get into specifics of anything happening, but I think community, regardless of what the issue is, community and coming together is an important part of the answer, no matter what the problem is.
Friendship and family, yeah, they're at the heart of this, yeah, and community, yeah.
Yeah, and so the idea, that imagery of being around the fire, right? I think that that's really going to resonate with a lot of people. I saw PL nodding too, so I want to make sure he gets his thoughts out on that beautiful explanation as well.
I had wondered, because of course, you know, I in school at medieval literature and minor history, that's what I took, and of course the ecclesiastical history of English people was required course reading, and I feel like when I read Philip's books, I'm transported back. Obviously, he's a medievalist, but I feel like I'm transported back to something akin to a medieval type world in those eras. You know, obviously the ecclesiastical history covers a long period of history back to the Romans, etc. But what I'm talking about though is that Bede writing in around 700 AD, that when I read Philip's books, I'm transported back to that sort of environment. I picked, you know, it's like pastoral Britain, you know, and Philip's wonderful descriptions about forests and fauna, and you know, just it's one of the reasons why I'm so looking forward to While Darkness Gathers, to go back to that world that Philip created, that I loved and I miss. And as I said, you know, his series is my favorite science fiction, you know, fantasy indie series of all time. So I just cannot wait to get back. I'm so excited, and of course, congratulations, Philip, on While Darkness Gathers. And I'm hoping, I'm not sure if maybe Taylor might have been asking this down the road, but you know, hoping it's not the last time we will be back in the world of Edan. So
thank you, PL. Yeah, you're so kind, but I do plan to write a lot more in Jormungand. So we'll have I think up next will be a prequel, because again, I'm kind of an idiot. What I should have done is written a short little prequel for people to get them, you know, to take a peek at the world. But I wrote a sequel because I'm an idiot that nobody can read unless they've read the trilogy. But no, that was the story that was in me, and I had to write it. It just came out, you know. But I do have several ideas for prequels now, and I like the idea of writing standalones for a little bit. I may go back to writing something bigger, a series or trilogy or whatever. I don't know, but I like the idea of writing standalones because I want more standalones. I want more fantasy standalones to exist. And I think it's a great way for somebody to get to know your writing. I mean, Jenny's, if she's still there in the chat, I mean, I feel like reading To Ride Hell's Chasm was a fantastic introduction for me to her writing, and sold me. And you know, I realized, wow, this person is brilliant, and I want to read more of what she's imagined, you know. So I hope that I can write something convincing, maybe as a prequel next. We'll see.
So I just want to say, will we get our Edan Silmarillion?
Maybe. I did write a whole history of the place before I wrote the trilogy. I wrote a whole like mythology and history and all kinds of stuff.
Sign me up, sign me up, sign me up, sign me up. Please. Quickly, The Silmarillion is actually my favorite book from Tolkien. And The Silmarillion...
That tracks.
Heavily, A Drowned Kingdom, the first part especially, heavily inspired by.
I see that. I see that. Yeah.
And Fire and Blood by George R. R. Martin. I think it's tough. Although it's not in, it doesn't supplant the main books in Song of Ice and Fire. It is close because I love that type of book. So Philip, sign me up. If you're going to do some kind of compendium with the history of Jurmenland and with the world, sign me up. Sign me up.
Okay, there's one reader at least.
There you go. I just want to also make sure I say hi to Eddie, and Chibi Po's here. Thanks for joining us, guys. So I did kind of want to come back to the idea of continue the idea of your expansive world that we're talking about. So PL said that coming back to it feels comforting, feels real, right? And we all have worlds like that. When we leave it, we just want to come back to it. And there's a certain feeling when you come back to it. And I imagine with your own world, you probably have that feeling as well, right? So you said we're going to get many more installments, right? Because you plan to come back into this world you spent so much time creating. And I also had watched your most recent The Weeks That Were video. Okay. And in that video, you were talking about you're kind of reading a lot of depressing stuff right now. That's just kind of where you are in your buddy reads and your reading life at the moment. So I'm wondering if your world also offers you that safe harbor, right? So you might be reading something depressing, but you have this world you've created and you can put light there, right? So create the fire that we were talking about, so to speak, right? So do you feel that that's something that's been a comfort to you throughout this process?
For
being
sure.
able to come back to it?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that that's a definite yes. I find that the older I get, maybe something to do with age, but I definitely have a preference for stories that give me a balance of despair and sorrow and hardship and all of that with light and beauty and joy and connection. I don't think that I wouldn't be prescriptive about this by any means. There's a place for stories that explore nihilism, and that kind of thing. And I'm glad they exist, and I will engage with those stories. But at the same time, I think we can easily recognize that stories that are just happy and hunky-dory and everything's great, well, wait, they're not that interesting, really, are they? I mean, when everything's just perfect, who writes a story where everything is perfect and the world is, nothing happens? That doesn't really work very well, does it? And I actually think that there's, for me anyway, I have a preference for a balance. Because I think that's actually life. I feel that life presents us with loss and sorrow in equal measure to, happiness and beauty. And it just wouldn't be compelling otherwise. It's almost like there are two sides to a coin, aren't they? In other words, there is no life without death, really. Let's get down to it. When it comes down to it, there's no life without death. And it is, in fact, death is what makes life precious. So we do need those things in our stories. It's very important to include those things. But I also feel that it's not childish or immature or naive or stupid to experience joy and beauty and connection and compassion. I think that those things are actually just as compelling as the hard stuff. So I hope that I offer a balance of a sort in my own writing. I hope that very much that is the case. I know that there are hard, terrible things that happen in my books, but I also hope that I offer a reader a chance to experience catharsis, a chance to experience beauty and connection, and along with the characters, that maybe even there are tears of joy for some readers at times, and tears of loss at the same time. So yeah, there's a that's the goal anyway, for me, is to somehow find that balance that feels right to me. And that's going to vary from person to person, I suppose, but for me, my favorite stories of all time are the ones that achieve a kind of balance between these things. And I try to emulate that in my storytelling. So when I think of Malazan, or I think of Realm of the Elderlings, or I think of Wars in Light and Shadow, some of the greatest achievements in fantasy, in literature even. These are stories that to me present that balance that I'm looking for,
Yeah, I also saw in that same video that you were starting Dandelion Dynasty, and I think that is another series that does that. Yeah, I know PL's read it, right? So
cool.
You finished it, right, PL?
Yeah, thanks to you. You're the one that kept singing his praises, and I'm like,
I'm a Stan account.
I'm actually I'm in the middle of Grace of Kings right now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
epic.
I think people do that balance thing that you're kind of talking about. So, yeah, I think just hearing you say it's not naive to want those things really reminds me a lot about how people talk about romance in books.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need that. It's like, but we're humans. That is what we do,
Yeah.
right? I know Paul's talked about that quite a bit, but I feel that kind of dismissive attitude is used a lot towards romance in a book. Sure. I don't know if you felt the same way, but
yeah, I think it just somehow many people have the perception that it's more edgy or intellectual if everything is depressing and gray, So
they cut to the truth of matter because everything sucks, right? So yeah. I don't know if PL had anything else specifically about it, Dan, but I did have one kind of extraneous question about other reading that you're doing, Philip. So before we go there, I want to make sure I open it up to PL. If PL had any more questions or things that you wanted to talk about in the Adan world, because there's so much to talk about.
Oh, I know. Just quickly, the only one thing was that mentioning Philip about the special edition, and that it sold out. It sold out fast. Congratulations! I mean, it was mentioned in the chat. I believe it's Vaughn Roycroft, another brilliant author who mentioned it. Wow, Philip, that must be and that special edition is just stunning. I know it's on your shelf there for the Way of Adan, but I mean, just kudos to you. I mean, what was that feeling like to? I mean, and you're going through the production of this special edition, this beautiful artwork and everything else, and you're hoping that it does well. And Broken Binding, obviously one of I mean, Broken Binding is it's avant-garde now in terms of what they're doing with publishing, not just special editions. Like they're on the cutting edge here. And then your special edition sells out.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I feel very privileged to have had this opportunity to work with the Broken Binding on this. They are really great at what they do. And I like especially that not only are they a company that wants to make beautiful books, but part of their mission is actually to make them a little more accessible than a lot of the other companies that make these special editions. So and I know everything is relative, and I'm certainly somebody, most of my books are used, and I use the library a lot. So I'm very conscious of price and everything else. And I understand that this is not a cheap investment. But all that said, relatively speaking, what the Broken Binding does is they do make these books available to more people than otherwise, by keeping them relatively affordable, relative to, and look, some of the other companies, and they are beautiful books, but they can cost hundreds of, even thousands, so the Broken Binding does a great job of making beautiful books that are actually a little more accessible for more people. Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, your version is from their press, right? Which means it's Smithsonian, right? It gets the full broken binding treatment, right?
Yes, it is. It's the Broken Binding Press. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a couple of their press books, and they are quality. So, you know.
Especially when you consider what you're paying. It's really something. Yeah.
It is. And you get all of that art to be able to see your world come to life. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations on the sellout.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's I've had to take a step back from book buying because of the big move coming up. So I've just been looking longingly at all of the emails I've received, but there's some really good stuff coming out. So love to see you thriving there. So the one comment that I have was a bit extraneous, but it has to do with other reading that you're doing, is I know a huge portion of your content in the recent maybe year, correct me if I'm wrong, but is One Piece, right? So you're kind of jumped into the manga world, right? And you had mentioned in that the weeks that were recent video that One Piece was giving you that little pop of joy that you wanted in the midst of all of your gray reading at the moment. So as you know, someone who is kind of enmeshed in the world of where manga comes from, right? So One Piece is just kind of a part of Japanese culture. It just is like, it's been around for so long that everyone takes it for granted. Let's put it that way. The kind of the way that people might take, you know, Lord of the Rings for granted in fantasy. It's just part of like the landscape. But I have a very interesting view on it because I haven't really watched it. But my husband is not the biggest fan. But a lot of people are. So my whole point here is that the world of manga is vast, right? One Piece is seen as a cornerstone of it. But are you converted to manga? Are you planning on diving more into this world, trying different things? I know you've talked about it with Murphy, I think, and I know Murphy's tried a bunch of different manga at this point. But the world of manga is so vast. You can find anything. Like when we got our pet snake, I had to started reading manga about taking care of reptiles because that is a subgenre. Like there's enough books that do that. So I'm not sure those have been translated, but they do exist, right? So I'm curious, are you going to dive into it? What do you enjoy about manga if you are going to? Like, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, One Piece has been a real joy. It's been a lot of fun for me. I grew up on comic books, like I said before, and I like the visual medium in that sense, the visual storytelling. And the humor is what first grabbed me when it comes to One Piece, which is, you know, continues to be an important part of the silliness of it, the goofiness of it. But it also includes some really important, timely themes. A lot of stuff in there about oppression and othering and forms of violence, including political violence. And there's just a lot of really important stuff that we're seeing in the world right now that One Piece is dealing with head on in a way that I really find interesting. And there also are all these really powerful emotional moments. Like bring your tissues with you if you read One Piece, you know, because it really does hit you in the feels, as the kids say, right? So it's got all that going. It's tremendous, and it's just so diverse and eclectic in what goes into it. You know, you can tell that Oda has read a lot of stuff from all over the place. So you might find in a certain arc, you know, that you're seeing direct references to Gulliver's Travels or to Journey to the West, or, you know, just various things that all kinds of influences go into it. So it's got some depth, really, that might surprise people who just see it as a silly little goofy, you know. And I don't watch the anime. I only read the manga, so I don't know how that experience is. I've watched bits and pieces of the anime because you do get a lot of recommendations from fans. As I'm reviewing the series, I've checked out a few things here and there, but mostly I'm a reader. So, but yeah, I have prior to One Piece, I read 5 manga series. So I'm still really a newbie when it comes to manga. But I'm absolutely sold. I plan to do other series after I finish or become current in One Piece. So I have a few that I'm really one that actually I thought I knew what I was going to read next. So a lot of people have been telling me read Berserk. It's definitely a priority. I'll try Berserk at some point. Akira.
I would not recommend it in the current depressing state you're in. I would leave that.
Yeah, no, not right now. I need to.
Comments are saying that too. Yeah.
Akira was another one I was intrigued by, one of the early manga. But there's this one called Kingdom that just recently has gotten an official, or is getting an official English translation that I think may actually. I haven't said this anywhere, so this is breaking news. But
you heard it here first.
May take priority for me because it's one I've been hearing about a lot, and it sounds like something I'm going to enjoy. I think it's set in China, but it's like historical manga, something along the lines of one of the manga that I read early that I loved was Vagabond. So if it's in any way, shape, or form similar to Vagabond, I think it's something that'll be up my alley.
Does this have anything to do Kingdom? I'm probably confusing because I don't know much at all about manga. So there was I think it was a TV series. It was more like I think it was set in ancient feudal China, and there was like zombies. I can't remember. Was that called Kingdom? Is that related, or is that something different? I'm probably off base here, but.
My understanding, my husband and my mother-in-law both love Kingdom. So, you know, they've just been passing that series. It's been like floating through my house for like years as they read it. But I haven't read it personally, but my understanding is that it's based in that same Chinese time period where, like, if anyone played PlayStation, Dynasty Warriors. I don't know. It's like, so the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of media was made about that conflict. So it could be the same conflict, but I don't know if they're actually connected.
Okay. Yeah, I'm probably, like I said, I'm probably conflating the wrong. Like I don't know anything about manga. I was just curious. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's a great choice, Philip. Just knowing how different my mother-in-law and my husband are at what they enjoy, and they both love it. So I think that would be a really good choice. And I'm more, when I grew up, I was more in like the shoujo world, so more human than action, if that makes sense. So relationship, not necessarily just romantic relationships, but that kind of deep human connection is more what I know. If you ever wanted to hear about those, you know, we could definitely talk about that. But when it comes to a lot of like the big action series, I also haven't read them, much to my husband's chagrin. But yeah, I just wanted to ask because I feel that there's like a barrier to entry almost with manga, because some of the things that become standard for you when you're used to it are a little jarring at first. So you mentioned the anime, like One Piece. I'm surprised so many Westerners use One Piece as their entryway because it is so anime. And the yelling, the screaming, the chaos, like the big standoff moment, you know, where it's like, well, one of you would already be dead, you know, so it's just very
hyperbolic.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. So it's nice to hear that One Piece has done that for you. So there's a whole world to explore, truly. There's
looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, I hope you get your little spot of joy in the middle of everything else you're reading. Just there's a couple comments here. Just wanted to put these up about Berserk. Berserk is super dark. But if you did enjoy Vagabond, and there was a recommendation from Chibipo. Nobunaga no Chef is a bit earlier during the Sengoku period and involves Nobunaga, obviously.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
There was a recommendation there. But we are coming up on, we have reached an hour and a half, which is not surprising with the three of us. We're chatters, but it has been way too long since I've had a chance to catch up with you. And I'm just so thankful that you were able to come back on and chat with us. And we were kind of on a hiatus for page twoing. We've both just been so busy. So this is the absolute perfect episode to come back on.
Oh, well, I'm honored. I'm incredibly honored. And I love both of you. And I think that our community is the richer for having the two of you around doing the series. It really means a lot to all of us that you that you do this important work, and I'm very grateful that you invited me, and it's always a joy to chat with you guys. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I said when we were talking about this channel on social media, I said friend of the series, because at this point, anytime you want to come on, we'll have you.
Okay.
You're very much a friend of the series.
Be careful.
And I'm sure
I'll take you up on that. So
please do. Please do. I mean it. But I wanted to pass it off to PL if he has any final thoughts before we sign off. Anything there?
No, just that, Philip, you're beloved in the community. You're beloved by us. It is just such a joy to chat with you. And I hope we just continue to, benefit from your marvelous insights on your BookTube channel. The craft and the intellect you bring to your analysis, and it's so insightful. And the joy you bring of books, of loving books, and your kindness to all of us, right? You're a mentor and a leader for a lot of us. We look to you. You're a shining example and a pillar in the community. So it's just fantastic to chat to you again. And again, and I know you're very humble, but you are a brilliant author and someone that I look to as an author. As I look to you in terms of the craft, right? And I've learned a lot from you in terms of craft by reading the Adan trilogy. So I cannot wait to read While Darkness Gathers and everything else you plan to write. So congratulations on all the success as well.
Well, thank you both. Thank you very, very much.
Of course, I second the success part, but we'll go ahead and do a sign off here. So if someone jumped in the middle of this, Philip, and they live under a rock and don't know who you are, could you give us just a little sign off where they could find you, anything you'd like to shout out?
Sure. Yeah. Well, my channel is Philip Chase, and I am also on all the other social. Well, am I? So I'm on Blue Sky and X, and also nowadays I've joined Instagram. So and all three of them, I'm Philip Chase 90. Philip Chase 90. So yep, that's me.
There will be links in the description down below for anyone who's curious and wants to find Philip. So then I'll pass off to my wonderful co-host, PL. Look at me. I'm pointing in the right direction. Consistently. Not myself. I'll never do that.
Thank you so much, Taylor. Normally, you can find me beside Taylor, page doing my channel, The Dragon Kingdom Saga, 6 Elemental Interviews, where I do something similar with a focus on indie authors predominantly. Before We Go blog, where Mrs. Snetter, as Taylor is. Shout out to the wonderful Beth Tavin, Before We Go blog crew. The books, The Dragon Kingdom Saga, plstart.com. 4 books out. 5th one, A Pack of Wolves, coming shortly, very shortly. And I quickly, if you forgive me, one piece of shameless self-promotion. I am lucky to be part of the wonderful Shapers of World anthology. It's coming out March 25th. There's some brilliant authors on here. MJ Kuhn, a lot of names you've heard of. I don't know why they picked me, but they did. It's the wonderful Ed Wood. He is an award-winning podcaster. He's chosen over the past 5 years to invite certain authors on his podcast and then ask those authors to be part of his wonderful anthology. So this is the 5th version. My story, A Forest Dark, is in there. Read it for the other people's stories because they are brilliant. But if you're interested in the Dragon Kingdom Saga and you'd like to check out something, my first short story by me, if you call it short, it's 10,000 words. I struggled to write something short. But I think you might find this very interesting if you read the Dragon Kingdom Saga. So check it out, Shapers World 5, coming March 20.
Ooh, I love me some short stories. I'm in my short story era, so that's just.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, sorry, quickly. I just wanted to reviewers only if you're interested in an arc, and I welcome. That's for Taylor, for you, and Philip included. If you'd like an electronic arc of because there's some great stories there, please just message me and I'll send you the EPUB.
Say no more. I just said I was in my short story era, so it's calling to me. I love world building. I'll message you. We talk all the time. So, but if you don't know who I am, my name is Taylor. My channel is Made Between the Pages. You may be watching this on my channel or PL's channel, but you can find mine here. Also part of Before We Go blog, as PL mentioned. I'm a SPIFPO judge, although the team really carried the weight this year. I got to say, but I have read some really good stuff over the years in SPIFPO. I guess that's kind of it. I'm no longer on X. If people are watching this, I have left that platform, but you can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, all the other places, Goodreads as well. So once again, thank you so much, Philip. for joining us. I'm sure you'll be back in the future. We'll talk in some other capacity. But as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you to everyone in the chat. You all are what makes this, what it is. We love chatting with you all. So thank you for joining us. And we'll see you on the next episode of Page Chewing.